Hi everyone, so I'm Thomas, founder of FE International. Today I'm going to be talking about ways that as freelancers you can build businesses that you can eventually sell. So firstly, a little bit about me and my company. Founded FE International in 2010. In 2010 I was actually freelancing, like Brennan mentioned, and I decided to kind of ramp up what I was doing on a freelance basis into something slightly more full-time. We've completed over 450 deals, which equates to just over 60 million in sales. We're growing about 80% year on year. We actually have 22 people now. The slide's a little bit out of date. We've been 100% self-funded to date, so we've never raised any money. Very much like started out freelancing, reinvesting that money as we've gone. So what are we going to learn today? So I'm going to talk, you don't have to work forever. I think a lot of people, particularly when you're freelancing, it's the kind of idea and notion of swapping hours for cash. I know a lot of you, like particularly the more successful ones, are moving on to like retainer-based, project-based, which is certainly moving in the right direction. But there's no reason why you can't build an asset you can actually sell in the process. So one of the natures of being freelance for a lot of you, particularly if you're starting out, is you might not be busy all of the time. You don't necessarily have work coming in 24/7. So one of the advantages of building something on the side, whether that's like a website, a SaaS app, a mobile app, or whatever that might be, means if you've ever got any downtime, you can spend some extra time on that business. For a lot of you, all of you in the room have unique skills, something you can do significantly better than the majority of other people in the world. So you can leverage those existing skills that you already have to build something. And you also can create freedom. One of the issues with freelancing and working in general is you're always swapping your time for cash. Whereas if you build up an asset that can eventually be sold, depending how big it gets, you could either never have to work again, or be in a situation where you can kind of be a lot more relaxed, financially secure, and be in a position where you're not necessarily having to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week for the rest of your life. Which is one of the difficult things with being self-employed, being freelance. You don't necessarily have the pension backup that you might get in a regular job. So having something that you've built up can eventually be sold kind of can be the equivalent of a pension. So what do buyers want? What are people looking for? It's all very well me standing up here going, yeah, build a business, sell it for $10 million or whatever that might be. But it's always best to figure out, just like when you're trying to figure out a product to sell to potential new customers and clients, what are people actually looking to buy in the first place? So probably one of the most common questions I get from people who've never really built a business before, or ever really thought about this before, is what's the best thing to build? They're always like, oh, there must be what's the trending topic? What should I be looking to build? I always say that you should build something around your current skill set. If you're not a developer, don't try and build a SaaS app. If you're not a designer, don't build something that's based around great design. If you're not a good writer, don't build a business that's based on great content. So I've put these in order of, I'd say, difficulty to set up and also the desirability acquisition-wise. The further you go down, the more complex it is to build, but also the more demand it is. So a blog is probably the simplest side business you can start. It doesn't take a huge amount of capital. It's generally content-based. And then moving on to an authority website, which would be kind of similar to a blog, but probably more bulky content. Could be selling ebooks, you could be doing lead generation, you could be doing affiliate sales, you could be selling all sorts on there. And then in the middle you've got something like an Amazon FBA store. So fulfillment by Amazon means you don't necessarily need to have your own website. You don't even need to be handling your own stock. So you can have an e-commerce business that's relatively hands-off and quite easy to run. Then an e-commerce store, something like Shopify or Magento, get your own products, whether you're drop shipping through a warehouse, through a fulfillment center, or using something like Amazon FBA. And then a SaaS product, which is probably what we're best known for in the industry, like selling SaaS businesses and SaaS apps. A lot of demand for businesses like that. The main reason being, and I think a lot of you who are freelancing have done the right thing, have those recurring payments on a monthly basis from regular clients, whether that's retainer-based or project-based or whatever that might look like. The same with a SaaS product. The thing that buyers really like about SaaS businesses is that you've got that recurring revenue on a monthly basis, and that's very powerful because it means that you could buy that business, potentially not grow it at all, and you're still going to have that consistent cash flow coming in. which you wouldn't necessarily get with a blog if you stop blogging. For many of you who have blogs, you probably notice if you stop putting the effort in, then the traffic begins to decline, or it's not really going to grow. So, as I mentioned in one of the early slides, we completed about 450 deals now. So we've seen a lot of different businesses. And across those, every single business we sell is unique. We don't sell things that are the same. They're never like copying each other. But there's a lot of similarities across the different deals that we can take lessons from and figure out what a buyer's looking for on a consistent basis. You don't necessarily need to do all of these things, and there's no recipe for a sellable business that if you follow that, you're definitely going to have something that people are going to want to buy. And vice versa, you could not necessarily follow all of these, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to have something that can sell. So I've put 3 example sites we've sold in the last couple of years. One was a $2 million business, one was $680,000, and one was $225,000. Like I said, all completely different, but they had a number of similarities. So particularly for those of you freelancing, if you're in the content space or whatever that might be, you've probably built a brand that's based on you, like your personal name. You might not necessarily have a company name. So if you're going to go down the blog route or the authority website route, I'd really recommend using a pseudonym. So use a name that's not your own. Picture-wise, often using a picture and having a real name behind it does build some trust. So consider using a cartoon or something similar to that rather than an actual photo of yourself. And that means from a buyer perspective, they can take over that business and they don't have to worry about being you, which is obviously almost impossible. There are some examples of businesses we've sold where the owner's quite prevalent and people know who they are. Those sales are often the ones that we publicly announce. But they tend to be a little bit more challenging and less desirable to a lot of buyers. They're also, back to the point I said earlier, people are always asking what's the hot trend, what are all the cool kids working on at the moment. Keep it evergreen with the content and the niche you target. So many people try and ride trends. It might be great in 6, 12 months, but 3, 4, 5 years down the line, that business is not necessarily going to be popular, still not going to be trending. Another thing with businesses we see that's successful is the sellers time the sale right, and there's consistent growth. So a lot of people will run a business for a while, like I was saying earlier, you might be blogging every single week, very disciplined, and then you get to a stage where you kind of get bored of blogging, get distracted, you get a new job, you get a new busy client or whatever, and you kind of stop writing that content. That's often when people think about selling. It might be 3 months too late when it started to decline. That's really the worst time to sell. I'd say when the going's good, that's the kind of time when you want to be thinking about that exit. A lot of people, we've sold a lot of businesses for people where the business is growing consistent. Everyone's like, well, why did you sell? But often you can get a premium in the market. There's a lot more demand for it, and you can often walk away with a much better deal than you would have got in 6 months' time if it started to level out. For a lot of you, Gina's talk yesterday was talking about outsourcing content, other basic tasks in your business. So everyone has a unique skill, something they're really good at, and that's really what you should focus building your business about. But the things you're not so good at, think about outsourcing them. It's obviously a luxury that's not available to everybody. It'd be ignorant of me to say, oh yeah, on day one, before you make any money, start outsourcing all the stuff you don't want to do. Hire people to do this, hire people to do that. It's not necessarily possible, but as you start building something out and growing it, consider the things you can outsource. And from a buyer perspective, buyers inherently are lazy. They don't want to do work when they buy a business. The least work you can possibly make for them, the better. And the less they have to replace of you, the better as well. So if you've got a unique skill and you're really good at something, that's great for your business when you're growing it. From a buyer perspective, that poses quite a significant risk. Because taking that business over, they don't necessarily have your design skills, writing skills, coding skills, or whatever that might be. So the more you can outsource or document, a lot of people talk about, particularly as you grow a business, we've got to 22 people now, so everything we have internally is systemized, documented, written into processes. So really think about those things. And whether it's still you doing the work, you don't necessarily have to be outsourcing it. If you can get that into process and documented, then from a buyer perspective, it's a lot easier to come in and take over that business. So I mentioned about avoiding trends, and this really is quite important when you're building things. a lot of people, when they're trying to think of ideas, like, oh, I need a good idea for a business, and then they'll look in like TechCrunch or like the newspaper or the news or whatever, and they'll be looking for something that everyone's talking about and is really like popular. So trends can often be predicted, but you obviously do not know where every single trend and like idea and niche is going to go. But you can usually have like a best guess of where you think that's going to go. So for example, iPhone apps, they're like notoriously bad for things like that because they'll be around for 6 months, 12 months, popular for a while, and then they just completely die off and they're not popular at all. But a lot of people try to build businesses around them. You might get lucky and be that like 1% person who manages to sell it or someone wants to buy that business, but it's less likely than not. So I think the main question to ask yourself is, will that niche still be around in 5 years? Will it still be popular? If not, consider doing something else, or consider a slightly different approach where, for example, instead of talking about one particular app, you might decide to build a website that reviews all apps or something along those lines. And that means when the latest trend comes out, you can still leverage it, but you're not in a position where you're entirely based around one app, one niche, or whatever that might be. So said mobile apps are notoriously bad for trends like this. So this is Google Trends for Angry Birds. As you can see, 2011, everyone had the app, apart from me, I think. Continue growing like really steadily, and you can see since then it's kind of dropped down to almost nothing now. I think there was a slight spike last year when he relaunched the app or something along those lines. But if you'd have built something around that, you would have been in a great position for like 3 to 6 months, maybe even a year. And then after that, the business would have declined probably like 80, 90%. And then you'd been in a position where that really was not sellable. So avoid the trends. They might be sexy, they might be cool, everyone might be talking about them. But one thing I've learned over the years of all the businesses we sold, often the most popular businesses are not the most like attractive on the outside. They're quite boring. Seen all sorts of niches that you just wouldn't really have thought about that kind of year over year are very consistent or ideally slightly growing. So what's a good niche? Everyone asks me this question as well, like what should I be building around? So something that's consistent or growing every year. There are a lot of niches out there that are like quite boring, but every single year they're going to be very consistent. People continuously are buying in that niche. And something that's popular all year, a lot of people also look for seasonal businesses. So something like, for example, Christmas trees. Every single year people are going to be getting Christmas trees. But on a like month-by-month basis, that's not a very profitable business. You effectively have 11 or 10 months of the year when you're not making any money, which is great because you could have one really good month where you're working 60 hours a week, making a bunch of cash. The rest of the year, you're not really doing anything. From a buyer perspective, that's significantly more risky because if you had one bad month effectively, which is your big month, then that business is not really worth anything. And there's always a risk that you could have a slow month where anything could happen. So this is an example that I've conveniently chosen, which is selling websites. As you can see, over the last 10 years, it's been like very consistent, trending slightly upwards. So if you were a savvy business person, you might enter that niche and think, well, this is a good one. But there are tons of niches out there. Something like Google Trends will usually give you a pretty good idea. I think if you look at this chart for the last 10 years, it'd be reasonable to assume that in 5 years' time, it's still going to be in a similar position. But everyone in the room is smart. You can often figure out where a niche is going to be in a few years' time. So another thing I've learned over the years of being an entrepreneur, people are like, oh wow, you've got this like great company. Where did you come up with the idea? Like, I didn't really, kind of like accidental. A lot of people spend months, even like years, trying to think of like the perfect idea. They're like, well, the only way I can build a business that anyone's ever going to want to buy is something that's unique, something that's like really interesting. But actually, I've found over the years that the vast majority of clients we deal with don't really put that much thought into it. They just build something that kind of grows. So you really don't need a good idea as such. And we've really seen like everything over the years. So what I'm going to do, and like one of the things I like think about on a daily basis, I'm always like looking at things, and like even in really random situations, I'm like, well, there's a potential niche idea. So what I'm going to do is something a little bit different. I'm going to go through a couple of like pictures I've seen like just taken randomly in my personal life in the last few weeks, and we're going to see if we can guess what the niche idea could be based on some businesses we sold recently. So the first one to shout it out and get it right gets a hug from Kai.
Give good hugs.
So this is our office dog, Squidge, who's run into my office. So who can guess the niche idea?
Office dogs for rent?
It's not office dogs for rent. We do have those, but it's not that. And it's not in my plant either, because that would be a bad dog. Anyone else? Oh. Huh? No, it's dog food. So it's a very boring niche. People be like, oh, dog food, oh, everyone's got a dog, all dogs like to eat. But it's a great niche. Dog owners spend money, and that's something you really want to look for when you're looking for a niche. It might sound really boring, like, who wants to write about dog food? And often they're the niches that other people don't jump into. If you go for something that's like really trending and everyone's doing it, you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of competitors. But who do you know in your personal friend group who's passionate about dog food? Probably not anyone. But who, when they have a dog, is like researching what they should be eating and spending money on a weekly basis, often for many, many years. So, this is an example from a recent sale. There's a blog about dog food. It sold for $460,000. Using a pen name, so he didn't have his personal name in it. He just wrote one weekly post about dog food. He was just reviewing different types of dog food. And when you're looking at any niche, you can always think, well, if I don't like that one, if you prefer cats, what about cat food? So there are lots of different ways you can go about it. This wasn't a particularly complicated idea. He was actually a freelance SEO consultant. It's something he built on the side. It wasn't a full-time job for him. Once he started making a little bit of money, he started outsourcing the content. And then from there, you get that kind of consistent growth that keeps going. So that's niche number one. This is a picture of me that I took recently. Who can guess? I was warned not to put this picture in public, but there we go. So who can guess the niche?
Thomas as a service.
Nearly. You're close. What kind of products? What industry or niche?
Beauty?
Getting closer.
Hawaiian shirts.
Getting closer still. Yes. Fashion. As you see, should have all got that one, come on. So there are really hundreds of possible businesses. It might sound stupid, but anywhere you look in your life, there are things that might seem stupid on the outside, but actually, there were lots of people in that industry. This was an e-commerce store. It was Amazon FBA, but also some drop shipping via his own store, selling sunglasses. Sold for $240,000. It was a side project. He didn't work in it full time. He had actually a charity he worked on in his full time. That was his passion project. But this was his kind of income. This paid the bills, helped him travel the world. So next picture. This is a picture of myself and my fiancée. So who can guess the niche?
Wedding.
Travel.
Close. No.
Sunglasses again.
No. They are the same sunglasses. No. I get in a lot of trouble for this one.
Hair nuts.
It's not hair nuts.
Divorce.
It's getting closer to that. It's similar to wedding rings. So I was thinking. So I was just thinking, in every niche you see, it could be weddings, could be engagement rings, but there are often a lot of things that people don't really think about. Who the hell wants to write about credit repair? But actually, very profitable. There are lots of people. It's one of those niches that people probably don't put publicly on a slide that's obviously not recorded, which is great. But people don't really think about the things these are real problems that people have, and they're searching for these things. People willing to pay a lot of money. They're not necessarily going to go around conferences being like, "Hey, you're in debt. You have problems with your credit." But they may well be googling it or searching for it, looking on private forums for solutions to these kind of problems. So this was another friend of mine who actually just got engaged at a very similar time. So hence why I put the joke in. The owner is a writer. He owns a small freelance small agency, and he hires a number of freelancers, much like Gina was talking about yesterday, kind of arbitraging their rates to write content. He was selling leads as an affiliate, not a very complicated business model. You don't need to build out loads of relationships or anything like that. And he had multiple features on big sites. Beyond just being a good writer, he'd got a lot of sites like Huffington Post, Entrepreneur.com, lots of different places to mention his site, just from very simple outreach. I know Kai and a lot of other people talk about doing outreach, and it can be really quite effective. To build a really successful site, it's a $510,000 business, you don't need a huge amount of mentions or anything like that. The business is only 2 years old. The main thing that he had done, which is very important as a business owner, I think a lot of people don't really think about this, is just consistency. You just need to turn up every day, keep publishing on a consistent basis, and then you're really going to have compounded success over the long term. The people who don't do so well will work on something really hard for 6 months, and then they go, well, it's not quite doing as well as I expected, and then they give up on it. The ones that really do succeed are the ones who keep going even when it's tough, not necessarily making as much money as they could be, and they'll fight through that, and then they'll get to a position where they'll start seeing that growth. They might get there, you could call it a lucky feature on Huffington Post or whatever, but if you keep sending enough emails, keep speaking to enough people, go to enough conferences, one day you're going to get that lucky break. So anything goes. Just think, what do you know about? Like I said, everyone in the room has a unique skill or something that you're good at that the majority of people are not, and build something around that. So think personal, like I did. I just took 3 pictures from my personal life and just thought about, what kind of business ideas can you get from these things? So can you write code? If any of you are programmers, why not think about building a SaaS app or a software product, whatever that might be? There are lots of different ideas out there. It doesn't need to be unique, and it doesn't need to be in a big niche. You don't need to be solving a big problem. You don't have to be like Elon Musk or anything like that. One thing I've noticed as well over the years, particularly with small businesses, is that the most obscure niches and things that you would think are really tiny market can actually be quite profitable, particularly if there's just 1 or 2 people and you're not necessarily thinking about building a larger company off the back of it. Can you write well? So a lot of you I've met over the last few days are freelance writers, and you're selling your time to people who are paying you premium amounts of money to write content. If someone's willing to pay $200 an article that you're writing, why not spend, not necessarily all of your time, because obviously you need to pay the bills, why not spend a fifth of your time or a third of your time writing content for yourself and for your own site, particularly if that's in a niche that other people probably aren't thinking about. So credit repair, who's thinking about credit repair on a daily basis? Not a huge number of writers. Write about something a bit different, write consistently, and make sure that you've got enough income coming in from your freelance work or your agency work. That means that you don't need to be worried about the income from that. The vast majority of people we see who are successful have another income stream when they actually start their successful business. I've never really recommended to anyone quitting their job or giving up their full-time income stream to start something new, because it often takes 6 to 12 months to start seeing results, particularly if you haven't raised funding, and particularly if you're not independently rich and can afford not to work for a year or 2, which the vast majority of us are not in that position, don't necessarily want to raise funding and effectively have another boss, and you don't necessarily want to be eating ramen noodles for the next 2 years. And there really is a niche for everyone. I've shown some slightly stupid examples of niches I've seen recently, but over the years I've really seen all sorts of niches you would not even think about. You wouldn't think there's anyone in that space, but actually to make a really good income and build something that's worth hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions of dollars, you don't need to be solving a big problem. You don't need to be changing the world. Come up with something, just work on it consistently. So I'll do a little bit of, let's do some Q&A, and then I'll go to wrapping up. Ooh.